So if you watched my January wrap-up video, you will know that I created a poll asking you whether you wanted me to wrap books up just once at the end of the month, or because I seem to be reading a fairly large amount of books each month now, which I'm super happy about, by the way, I break it down and wrap up every 5 books. And wrapping up every 5 books is the winner of that poll, but only by a relatively small margin. So I've come up with a plan that will hopefully make everybody happy. So I am, as you can probably tell from the title of this video, going to wrap up books every time I finish 5, but I will keep it within the month. So if I read, say, 12 books, I will wrap up 5 and then 5, and then I will wrap up 2, so that it's all still contained within a month. I will also do a month in review video where I quickly run through all of the books that I read, just telling you the names, the authors, the genre and the age range, and I can then send you in the direction of the various videos where I wrap them up more fully if you want more detailed reviews. And I will then talk through my goals and how the books I read fit in with those various goals. And I will link up above my 2020 goals video so that you know what I'm talking about if you're interested in that. So essentially there will just be a lot more content to do with the books that I'm reading on my channel, and I'm hoping that that will work for everyone. If you have any thoughts about any of that, then I would love to hear them. Please do let me know down below. But for now, let's jump into the first 5 books that I have finished in the month of February. As always, going to start with the books that I don't own a physical copy of so that I don't forget to talk about them. And there was only one in this first 5, and that is The Test by Sylvain Novelle, which is a short story that I don't want to tell you too much about, but essentially it follows a character who is taking a test to become a British citizen, and things start to go pretty wrong. And it's very dark, it's very difficult to read, it deals with a lot of very difficult topics, and it was incredibly insightful, I thought, but in a very dark and ominous sort of way. It's only very, very short. I think the page count is somewhere around 120-ish pages. I listened to the audio version, which I do recommend. The audiobook was very good, and that was only just over 2 hours. So it's not a huge time investment. It is a very short story, and I do think that it's worth reading. Just be prepared for it to be quite bleak, and be prepared to DNF it early on if you find that the themes are a little bit difficult to deal with. I can't really tell you the themes or the trigger warnings, because if I do, it would completely spoil the entire book. But there aren't any sexual trigger warnings, I will say that. There's no, sexual violence or anything like that at all. So you're safe on that count, but otherwise I don't really want to say too much, but I do think that it is a worthwhile read, and maybe just give it a go and be prepared to DNF if you think it's not for you. As I say, it's not a huge time investment anyway, so you'll know fairly quickly if it's the kind of read that interests you. But I personally really enjoyed it. I don't like to say really enjoyed it when it deals with such heavy themes, but I did really enjoy reading it. Next up, I'm going to talk about 8 Will Fall by Sarah Harrion, which is fantasy but with sort of horror elements. This is probably about as scary as I get in terms of my reading. We follow a character named Larkin who is an empath, which means that she can feel the emotions of other people and use them to either create or destroy. Positive emotions allow her to absorb and create things, whilst negative emotions can be absorbed for the purposes of destruction. But in the world that she lives in, magic is banned, and anybody who is found practicing magic is imprisoned until the Queen of the land needs some people with empathic abilities to go into the caverns underneath the city to find an evil and defeat it. And there's some body horror in here. I think that's the right terminology. Again, I don't read a lot of horror, so I don't really know, but I'm pretty sure that's what it's referred to as. So there's some body horror, be aware of that. I actually don't mind body horror quite so much. I think if it had been more graphic and disgusting than it was in this one, then I might not have been able to cope with it. But this was a fairly low level of body horror that's kind of synonymous with the kind of brutality and gruesomeness that you get in fantasy in general. So I was fine with it, but be aware of that if you're not used to that kind of graphic depiction of violence. It's kind of, yeah, sort of violence, sort of just people being ripped apart, basically. If you're not into that, then maybe avoid this one. But it was very, very tense and it kept me gripped the whole way through. I really needed to know what was going to happen. This is actually a standalone too, which is really nice because you don't get a lot of that in fantasy. And I really enjoyed seeing the full conclusion of the story. And there are some twists in here that they're not huge surprises by the time you get to them, but they're not what you expect when you start out in the book. So I really enjoyed that too. I've never read anything by Sarah Harrion before, but I definitely would check out her other works having read this one because I really, really enjoyed it. I actually listened and physically read this one because I thought that the dark, ominous themes would create a lot of atmosphere that would make that kind of reading experience really enjoyable, and I was right. The audiobook was very good and it definitely added to the atmosphere and the dark content, but it didn't make it too scary. So I would recommend that too if you have that available to you. I listened to it on Scribed, so I was able to access it for free through my Scribed membership and thoroughly enjoyed myself. Highly recommend. Then I read Warcross and Wildcard by Marie Lu, which is our, well, Warcross is our book club book for the month of February, and I think that those of us who have already started it have pretty universally enjoyed it so far, or enjoyed it if we've already finished it. I've obviously finished both of these. I finished this one and immediately wanted to read this one, so I went out and bought it. See my haul up here. And this first book, I'll tell you just about the first book, follows Emika Chen, who is a bounty hunter and a hacker, and she is hired by Hideo Tanaka, who created something called the Neuralink and a game called Warcross, which is a virtual reality video game that pretty much everybody in the world uses to manage their everyday lives. We're in a very futuristic society here, but somebody is trying to hack into his games and disrupt this Warcross competition that happens once a year. So he hires Emika to ferret this hacker out. Now, this first book at least deals with one of my favourite tropes ever, which is of course the competition trope, and also it's science fiction, but in our world, in a futuristic version of our world, which I personally really, really enjoy. I like seeing all of these futuristic advancements, and I especially like seeing it because it's just so possible at this point. We have virtual reality in our world already. I don't think it's that much of a leap that we could wear a pair of glasses all the time and constantly have access to that virtual reality world. So I really enjoyed that element of it. I really liked Emika as a character. I really enjoyed Hideo as a character, and I really liked all of the side characters as well. I've already mentioned I really enjoyed the world building, and both of these books actually were just so gripping. They are real page turners. They're not particularly long, just over 300 pages each, but even so I read them incredibly quickly because I just had to know what was going to happen next, and I highly recommend them. I don't know why it took me so long to get to these books, but I thoroughly enjoyed them. There's so many twists and turns, and the characters are so endearing, and there's so much action action, but it's not difficult to follow, which I really appreciate, because I feel like sometimes science fiction books can be a little bit difficult to follow if they're super heavy on the sciencey elements, and this is so close to the kind of technology that we already have that it wasn't difficult to follow at all. It was also helped by the fact that it's very similar to a film that I once watched called Summer Wars, and so I picked up Summer Wars Volume 1 by Mamoru Hosoda, which I will be reading Volume 2 as well, but these are the manga for the anime film that I've already seen that has a very, very similar premise. So in this one we follow Kenji, who is hired by one of the super popular, super pretty girls at school that he has a massive crush on to pretend to be her boyfriend at a massive family gathering out in the countryside. Meanwhile, we also have this online platform called Oz. It's part social media, part life management system, part video game, very much like the Neuralink from Warcross. And something goes wrong, it gets hacked, and Kenji and his fake girlfriend and her family have to try to work together to fix it. And there are a lot of similarities between this and Warcross. The vibe is very different, of course, because this is manga and Warcross is prose. But in theme, it's very similar. And so because I'd already seen the anime of this, it wasn't too much of a stretch for me to understand what was going on in Warcross. I'm going to be reading Volume 2 of this one probably next, if not very, very soon, and I might do a comparison between the two series. Let me know down below if you'd be interested in that. And that's it. Those are the 5 books I've read so far in the month of February. If you've read any of these before or you're tempted to read any of these now, please let me know down below. I do love chatting with you in the comments. But that's it for this one. Thank you so, so much for watching. If you like this video and want to see more like this from me, then do think about hitting that subscribe button, and I hope to see you here again soon. Thanks. Bye.